So probably let's start with introduce actually what about what we'll talk about today. And I think the very popular scene nowadays in probably in all the sphere of the business and the development, probably just in the world, is the artificial intelligence and the actually from the dev proposals. I started to just research and sometimes use for some special cases just to study how it works. And this team is very popular, but we can spend probably 30 minutes to understand, is it actually the tools that will resolve all your issues or just help with any troubles that you have, and actually it will resolve it step by step, and when you will just follow this tool, you will actually reach your results. But probably we can make as the main discussion of the current presentation. So let's start with the agenda. And I think the first that I will probably notice that first in some paragraph of current agenda will not we can just include some of them, like 2 paragraphs in 1 paragraph, and we'll speak about some themes inside other themes. I can just jump from one theme to another, and it can be our future in this presentation. But okay, let's start from the first topic, and actually let's start from the themes that probably everyone can understand this topic by themselves as something special, or just in some special way. And let's start with the topic: what is actually the ChatGPT, and how we can use this in some proposal of using the ChatGPT, because all you know what actually it is. That's the special learned model. In some case, it also use the NLP, the natural processing language, and it helps us to handle a big portion of information and understand and work with it in, based on our requests, and it can respond us with very understandable language, and also with some constraints, because artificial intelligence cannot just work as a real human, and it should have its own restrictions. But actually, the first and probably the most helpful option in ChatGPT usage is the virtual assistants. It does mean that you can use ChatGPT to help you to, for example, schedule your email or just help, but you could also send some credential to the system, and probably it sounds like not the best idea, but you can use it, and ChatGPT can do some work, some routine work, but you will not even spend this an hour per day. For example, it could also help you with the right emails and to help with the customer services. For example, you can use the ChatGPT as a part of your system. Mainly, you can see something like the chatbots somewhere in your application, where you can chat with some support manager. You can, for example, chat with the ChatGPT. Yeah, chat with chat. Actually, sounds weird, but as it is. You can also start emailing a lot of people using the ChatGPT. I probably think that some of you should already have seen the case when ChatGPT can be used, for example, in the Excel tables, and you can just use, I think, probably the 1,000 generated emails to handle some routine stuff, like, for example, for the researchers or for the some lead generation teams. You can just email a lot of candidates using this ChatGPT bot, because you could generate a lot of emails, and they will contain different messages, different names, different proposals, and just the different language that probably can simulate a lot of lead generation, or some people who just need to write text. It sounds like a good tool to to make this routine work, because you need, if you will not use the ChatGPT, you need to write a lot of letters. You need to spend some time to imagine how to, for example, speak to some candidates, or even for some region, for some cultures. But ChatGPT will help with this because it can include a lot of options. But all what you need is actually the technical, just to put your technical description and in a few sentences, and then ChatGPT will help you to handle this one. But it's also the best case always to read the generated text, because ChatGPT is cool, but sometimes it can generate very special stuff. The knowledge base, of course, and we will see on the next slides some special usage of the knowledge base from ChatGPT, because it knows a lot. It can also manipulate with some phrases that you will search, and it can help to find even things that you didn't imagine, for example. But the knowledge base is huge. It can help you to find something like the Wikipedia in chat, but only for the 2021. Based in case ChatGPT is, but there is the problem, because ChatGPT doesn't want to recognize that he was failed or he wasn't give you the true information. It can sometimes just generate text, but this text cannot be for example, the real answer for your question, because it never says that I don't know. That's the problem here. It's a good knowledge base, but all those information should be retested or researched, because sometimes it can generate some, or it can just understand your question in some specific way. So that's a good knowledge base, but not the best. And also, as I said before, it can help you to not spend a lot of money on the success on the customer service. But for example, as a part of the IT service, it can just help your clients to handle the frequently questions and frequently asked questions, and help them to just chat with someone. But it will be the chatbot, and he will receive, and they will receive the responses like from the live human, who will just copy paste the text from the scripts or text from your company Wikipedia, something like that. ChatGPT will do this by its own, and I think that's the very easy and common case to use the ChatGPT, because you can just give it some, for example, articles of inputs from your company scripts, and it will use them to, for example, to speak or just chat with your clients very fast. And it will also use the NLP model, so the messages will be probably as much real as they can actually. And the HR assistants, I think a lot of HR routines now can be replaced by the ChatGPT in case of when you need to chat a lot of people, email a lot of people, or just you can. I think the HR should always handle a lot of processes. ChatGPT is very, or probably sometimes extremely helpful to handle some background processes that can be just put to the ChatGPT, or just you can use ChatGPT to help to write something, to track something, and to handle some, for example, some dialogues with your employees, or just handle their behaviors, their emotions, even, but based only on text. And ChatGPT can accept the ChatGPT version 3, because the ChatGPT version 3 is probably the most common model. If we will compare it with the version 3.5 or the version 4, but the version 4 can actually understand and analyze, for example, your audio recognition from some calls, or just use the texting from any source, and it can understand and just make some decision, or make some, or give you some results based on criteria that you will use. That's very helpful stuff for HR. But as I said before, it's for ChatGPT version 4. That's the version with the premium account, but it's very helpful in these cases. And based on our slides, we need to understand how ChatGPT can help or not very help in some complex stuff in software system. Actually, what is the software system? That's the very complex, probably it's called the pool of processes that can be handled by the specific complex of programs or the sub-programs or the sub-processes, and we can call this a software system when some branches of our, for example, life even can be optimized by some program code. That's very simplified version, but mainly it's understandable how we can just do some input in our system. It will be understand, it will be optimize some request, and you will see some results. That's probably the very common, the very specific, and the very subjective mind, but it will help to understand from which point we'll look about the other slides. So the decision making is something when you will need to make some decision based on, actually mainly in our daily routine, we make some decisions. These decisions can be made from some points, some inputs. We can also have some experience in something, and we can make the decision. The ChatGPT can make decision using some inputs too, but it will be the information that you need to, at first, you need to filter the information. You need to put this information inside the small input with the text, and this information will be used by ChatGPT to answer some question, because mainly decision is something like the answer, because you will need to answer for some question and make this decision to do or not to do some work, or just make decision about buying something or something like that. The ChatGPT probably is a good candidate to help to make the decision, but not the greatest tool to make decision on its own. And it's not the best, I think it's not the best practice to believe ChatGPT on 100%, because it's smart, it knows a lot of information, but the decision making is something that people need to do by their own, I think. And this is something that should be much more complex or than just ask some NLP trained model. Okay, the emotional intelligence. I probably few weeks ago I said that ChatGPT doesn't understand something that we can call the emotional intelligence, but based on the progress from the ChatGPT version 4, it has much more emotional intelligence, and it can also understand the people as we think about the people. What actually this means? ChatGPT can understand when the people was kind, when the people was open, and when the people just tried to lie to you. That's or it can also understand probably some mood of the people. I've watched the research of the one developer. He spent probably 1 week to test a very simple case. He was an interviewer, and he tested people, actually in which case he recorded all the interviews, then he retranslated all those interviews in text, or just represent all those audios as a text, and then he tried to ask ChatGPT to analyze the ChatGPT version 4, to analyze this text, and by the criteria make some decision about this candidate, or just give the results in a table view to understand how much this person is matchable for the company, or just matched by his criteria. And he said his results, his own results as a developer or just as an interviewer, was similar in 90% to the results from the ChatGPT. It means like ChatGPT can understand something, but when it was similar only when you know the criteria and you spend all the time and you just straightforward by this criteria. You doesn't use anything else. You just use those criteria. So when you have the input, or you have the restrictions, or you have just the options that you will use to understand or to calculate some results, ChatGPT will help you, even with the emotional intelligence. But it's very important to understand that it's only ChatGPT version 4, because it has the most or just the best emotional intelligence from the other models. Actually, the social context. I think we have a lot of cases when sometimes it's hard to understand people, because they can be sad, they can be happy, and sometimes they can just hide some emotional. But the social context is something more. It's not just the behavior. It's about understanding a group of people, a group of emotions. You need to understand something that should include a lot of stuff there inside about the behavior, about how we talk, how the people talk, how special groups of people talk, and a lot of stuff there. And ChatGPT can help with this because he understands the information about what actually mean the social, and what mean the social context from some definitions and from some prepared information, how, for example, to understand some groups of people, how to help you to understand those groups of people. But the main problem here, it cannot understand something that we can call lie, because ChatGPT cannot lie to you. It can generate some not very truthful information, but it cannot lie. It cannot understand some emotion, and it cannot understand some social context when it actually doesn't clear. Probably ChatGPT will answer you with a very smooth phrases, but I'm not pretty sure that it can understand the social context as it is. It's much preferable here to analyze it by yourself, and analyze some very specific cases or very specific words, phrases by yourself, or some situation by yourself. It's not the best case to use or just to believe ChatGPT in 100%. It looks obvious, but I have seen some unimaginable researches when the people try to use ChatGPT step by step by their advices. Probably not the best case. And about the ethical considerations, that's something when people don't want to spend a lot of time, and they always try to use some ready or just build a decision, some decision from the box. There's the area when ChatGPT is very complex, because it's not very understandable when ChatGPT actually understand what is ethical consideration and what is actually mean in our proposals. I think this not the area where we can use, or where ChatGPT can show you the some expected results. But we have a lot of problems with ChatGPT, and let's talk about some drawbacks. In some cases, but also we need to understand that it should be the some common stuff. Probably you have your own stories and you have your own opinion, probably on the situations where you can use or talk about the ChatGPT in another way. But it's useful to, for example, talking as a developer. It's useful for me to talk in this topics about the ChatGPT drawbacks. So it's very hard to have your instance, for example, in your server, or use a lot of requests by using that are using the ChatGPT. The problem is it's very high price to pay when you're using something like the ChatGPT, because it uses a lot of calculations inside. The requests are heavy, and you should probably your project is, if you're talking about the small project, it's probably not the very high cost. But when we're talking about something like the enterprise level projects, ChatGPT is very high expensive product. And I have seen the researches where I've seen the prices, for example, when you have the 15,000 people per month, I think, yeah, you can spend 2,200. You can spend $22,000 per this month when you're using the ChatGPT. And when we have more than, for example, the 15,000 people, you will spend much more money just to use the ChatGPT, for example, in somewhere in your instances, or to collaborate with the OpenAI API. That's probably something that you need to understand when you're trying to use the ChatGPT. It's very cool, but when you understand, I mean, it's very cool but priceful now. But probably in future, the OpenAI team will work to make this request cheaper, and they will not give us so much stuff. Okay. And after this one, just a second, let's try to see the another slide. That's the limited ability by the handle the structured data. The problem here is when ChatGPT is not handled to save the data. It's handled to work with the already prepared data, and it's not very useful when you need to analyze some subsets or just understand some specific data and in some specific way. For example, when you use the metrics from the math or just some very specifically prepared information, like in the scientific researches or something like that, and it can sometime or just somehow break a part of your research just because it cannot understand it. And the problem also, ChatGPT cannot handle a lot of history in your dialogue. So if you even try to learn ChatGPT how to use your system or use your researches or use some data, a representation of data that you want to use, it has a lot of chances that ChatGPT will just not understand you or just stop understand you, because it can handle a very big amount of information. It can analyze a lot, and it can also try to spend all its resources to analyze a small portion of information. So it's also reasonable to not trying to ask a lot of questions in one message or in one input datum, and that's why it's preferable to try to split your messages, and it's also useful to not to use some structured data in some specific ways. Just the simple message and probably not the very simple answers ChatGPT can propose you. But it also depends on the ChatGPT models that you are using. As I said before, the version 3.5 not the same as the versions 3 as the version 3 and the version 4. They have a lot of differences inside, and actually even the ChatGPT team provide you some boxes with the explanation of the level of the criteria that actually can be reached by these models. Okay, the security and the legal approval. The problem here, the ChatGPT can use all the open source code. It can sometimes even, I'm not pretty sure because I haven't researched it, but it looks like when you type something inside the ChatGPT, it has a chance that it will save this information somewhere. For example, I think the 1 day ago or just a few days ago, ChatGPT was shutting down because they received the problem with the RabbitMQ service. Sorry, not the Rabbit, the Redis service, and some information from one chat was able in another chat, and that was something like the chat leaks. it wasn't very harmful because you can just see the some messages from people that you don't know, but it was a possibility to see some other messages. But what actually the case here, I think they use the service to handle or just to save in the chat history, but I think they need to monetize somehow their product, except only the premium accounts. So that's why I think somehow the ChatGPT can use your data, and even when it sounds like the ChatGPT use only open source data, it never trick with your private data. But I know a lot of companies that just deprecate to use ChatGPT because they are aware of some improper usage of their data, or even they deprecate developers to use some code bases from their current projects, and they don't allow to put any string of code in ChatGPT input. So looks like that's the question we'll start here. The training and learning, we understand that ChatGPT is limited by the year 2021, but for now. Also, you probably have heard about the plugins that can be used inside the ChatGPT, but I haven't asked them, and I think for some reasons it's not the best idea to allow artificial intelligence to make some requests on the internet. I don't know all the restrictions there, but I think the ChatGPT cannot use all the internet. I think there are some, probably even the pack of restrictions that should handled by the OpenAI team to not allow the system to search something, because we have another system to search something, and we will talk about it in a few minutes. And let's go to the next slide. Actually, about another system that can use some parts of the OpenAI, or use OpenAI as a core of their platforms. We can probably talk about something that you can already hear, but not very try to use, or probably you have even or probably you just waiting in the wait list of some of those systems. But my colleagues helped me to work and just test some cases inside the next slides, or the next systems that we'll talk about next slides. So the Copilot, it's a very helpful tool for the developers. Just to be honest, I'm not using the Copilot. I used it from only when it was the beta testing from the GitHub. But it's a very helpful tool to understand how to optimize your routine work with the code. What actually this means? This means you can use Copilot for some simple code generation, and it's helpful to, for example, build some functions that you can build probably almost in every project for some specific utils, some functions that will generate another function, just something that will generate a very routine stuff. And the problem with the usage of the Copilot is it will generate sometimes a working code, but a very not the cleanest code in my life. It can also not understand you correctly, and the one problem with the security, because ChatGPT, because the Copilot can use code from your repositories, and probably it can it will somehow use your own code, and it can not even share, but just use it in its own learning model. And it's not the best case to use it inside some inside some codes that are very specific for your project. Probably it's not even the best case to use this inside some very enterprise project, let's call in this case. But Copilot is helpful. The main proposals that I can receive from the Copilot, it can generate some simple, routine functions that probably I can write them by myself, but it's also useful to use Copilot. I've also sometimes used the alternative tools that called the Tab9, but it's not using so much AI inside, and that's why I haven't included in the slides. But you can also try to do or try to test some your daily routine stuff there. The Bing, that's the very probably innovative thing from the Microsoft. It calls the Microsoft Bing, and it's the new search application, or not even application, just the search widget or something that can help you to search inside the Bing. Why we'll talk about this because it uses something like the OpenAI ChatGPT model. It can because Microsoft spent some money to try to make, let's call the friendship with the OpenAI, and the Bing was open in the wait list. I also have some friends who already use Bing, and I think someone of you can also use Bing too. And the good case of using Bing, it's because it what actually can be done by ChatGPT. It will also it will just ask you for your question, and it doesn't leave any information about which resources it used, or just which resources were used in the ChatGPT answer. The Bing is why actually I think it's much better from the research cases, because it leaves all the links that were used to generate your answer. And I think it's very, or probably the first step to make these answers more correct, and just to build them correctly. And it's also helpful to try to research this information and try to handle some errors inside the information. Probably Bing doesn't understand the correct some pieces of your question. Bing can leave the links for some articles, for some even the wiki pages, and you will be able to read them and to check the results. And that's why Bing is very, I think it's a subjective, but I think it's very helpful to find information much. I can believe in this information that I will receive from Bing a little bit more that I can just receive from the ChatGPT. I think it's useful, and Bing can be used for some for each some information on the daily basis. But the problem here, the Bing is limited for now. It just, I think something like the beta testing. It's useful to test, but it's not very useful to make Bing something like your personal advisor. Just a tool. It's a subjective. Probably you can use Bing as your personal assistant, but I think Bing is much more useful as just the helping tool to find some tags that you will also need to check. And the BART, that's something that we can use. That's the AI from Google. You probably heard that it wasn't the best start for Google when they start showing the BART, and I think, yeah, this it's something that will be very cool, I think, because products from Google, as almost in all the cases, are very useful. But for now, BART is something very limited. You can also probably hear about the few issues with BART, and some journalists that use BART to speak for some specific themes about life, themes about the human being, something like that. And BART start showing not very appropriate behavior, and some points of BART weren't very soft. They were very strong in meaning of the text that BART wrote wasn't the very. It wasn't. Sometimes it was bad. Let's call in this case, but it's developing now. Google spent a lot of money to make BART better, and I think it will be the another very important AI that we will use probably in our daily basis, but it's still in progress. It's cool, but it's needs its own time. And some case studies about based on the previous slide, or some cases that ChatGPT will probably not the best idea, even in or mainly all of the cases. It cannot compare the latest technologies. In case of this phrase, it's something very simple, but I have a very simple example too. For example, you will have the latest iPhone or the latest Samsung phone or a technical giant company. Let's just put name aside. ChatGPT was ended his knowledge based in the 2021. This means it doesn't know about all the last technologies. It cannot recommend you some very new or the newest devices. It can't compare some technologies. It cannot compare some devices based on your needs, for example, or some prices, because it doesn't have the newest information here. So when you need to test or find some information just in time, or just make a lot of requests to understand the latest information, now ChatGPT will not help you. You need to understand that some areas will not be affected or just or don't affected by ChatGPT now. Probably in the future you will see some other results, but for now it's not for reaching some just-in-time results and results that will compare something very new or was, for example, was born the last second or the second before. Also, there is as I said before, it can fail with a lot of requests. Probably you have seen a lot of articles where ChatGPT just shut down because of a lot of requests that even you made, or just that there were some time, for example, it was daytime when a lot of requests were made for the ChatGPT and it doesn't respond for hours, and you haven't a possibility to test some functionality. It was probably a very new problems, and I think last 3 weeks it was much easier to handle some requests, but the problem were, and I think that the problems ChatGPT have is because a lot of people, bots, and another chats can use the ChatGPT to handle too many requests and too many answers they need to have. And I'm not pretty sure how the ChatGPT or any AI technology handle this escalations, but in my opinion, for now, it's very helpful. It's a very good tool to make a middle-sized request, and that request shouldn't be a very new, or just shouldn't contain information that are actually very new or to compare with the very new information, and it will be helpful to just have an answer for some very, not even the common, but some, let's call the classic information they need to receive from the internet, except something like the receipt from the cooking book, just a simple example. And from their perspective, it's also a very funny argument that the chat cannot understand a very magic request, because when the task contains only one sentence in description, and this sentence is "please do this rule," probably ChatGPT will not understand you. It will ask, even in better way, it will just ask you to expand your question. But as we all know, we have a very limited time to make a question, or very limited time for some tasks to give them a lot of description. And based on the previous slides, when you talk about the context, the context, and ChatGPT cannot hold a lot of context inside, or just it cannot remember all the history, but people can. And I can, for example, know about information that was the 2 years old, or even the 5 years old, or something like that. And when someone asks me to do something, I can just understand this phrase, "please do this rule," and I think when the ChatGPT will understand these phrases, and it will remember all of us, and remember all its dialogue with each of us for example, the 5 years, that will be the power of the AI. But for now, it's a very helpful tool. it's a very good something to handle the routine stuff, to handle some background tasks, but it's not something. It's not your personal advisor. It's not your personal life coach that will help you to resolve issues or just make your life easier by doing step by step its instruction. Yeah, and I think that's the main part of the presentation are probably over, and let's just have some QA session. And I've already seen some question from the chat, and it was a question about what ChatGPT is able to collect based upon the infrastructure or the data that is presented to it. And normally it's more York-centric, and if you maybe verifies the type of the data the ChatGPT is collecting, it would be able to accurately identify the variations of human emotion and the spectrum of that. I think ChatGPT someday it will understand some emotions. You can also understand some phrases, and understand some even part of the text, understand some emotional waves, and it will understand much more. But the main problem here is human is very complex system, and sometimes to understand people with 100% accurate, it's very hard. I'm not pretty sure that ChatGPT will understand all the spectrum of emotion, and it will not give you the very like the results that will contain only the truth answers there. But I think it's a good question, and probably after some updates we will have some different results, and we will not be able to talk about the ChatGPT in these cases or just using this slide in the future. But for now, I think the level of understanding ChatGPT some cases is limited, and it doesn't have it cannot understand all the emotion. It cannot handle all the emotion, and it cannot use as a part. Actually, it cannot be your personal a psychologist, and it cannot be used, for example, to make some politician decision, I think, based on this model. But probably it's only now time. I think in a few years we will see different results. And also it was a question about the AI to read the links and output short results just because reading is time. I know that ChatGPT will do something as just read the links, read the articles, and just give you information, or the main information from all the pages. It will save you time, and it's useful. It's okay. My only one aware of this is when you read the article and try to find some pieces of information that you actually need. You can also grab some another pieces of information. You can make some overvalue just because you have read something else. When you will receive only the strict answer for your question, it sounds like you will not give a chance to find something more than you have expected. You will just receive the information that you actually need. That will be the very targeted information. And that's probably also the problem of the ChatGPT. When we are talking about the ChatGPT, it's something like it's still you the possibility to analyze information more. It gives you only the targeted answer, but probably when you find an answer, you can also grab something new from other articles, from other information that probably wasn't so necessary for you. And that's something that probably ChatGPT doesn't allow you, and it's something like the sieve of the information in this case. But it can be only subjective. Just because I like to watch, I like to click on link and find information. Just for now, it's probably so. It's only because the ChatGPT is not so popular, and some stuff like Bing, like Bard, is not in their best form. But I think the future it can be changed. Probably it's only for now. Yeah, I think the QA queue is empty, and we can just have, or just give you the 1 minute, probably someone want to give me another question, and we will finish with this. I think we have spent a lot of time there. So yeah. Yeah, and yeah, so the QA queue is empty. So thank you for your time. I will be very glad to reach you somewhere in the LinkedIn or somewhere in chat, like the Telegram and other stuff, or just ping the agile way. Thank you for your time. It was very appreciated to be able to share some information and some subjective things about the ChatGPT, and bye.